CURES, sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to CURES. I'm Kara Sundlin. This is a show where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. And you might be wondering, how am I going to establish my well-being when it's back to school time? At the time of this taping, we're mid-August and the countdowns are coming. So I have invited child psychologist Dr. Laura Saunders here so we can sort of talk about a checklist for both the mental health of our kids and the parents, because they're probably intertwined. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
So we've had a lot of fun, stayed up late, probably eaten too many ice creams, too much screen time. The name of the game right now is transition. But if you talk to a kid or a teen about anything that isn't right now, and why you might want to plan like a couple weeks ahead, it falls flat. But we do need to start talking about transition with our teens.
We do. And I recognize that it's hard, right? It's hard as adults, right? I'm someone that loves the summer. It's, August 14th. I mean, we're not quite, we're not at the end of August, but a lot of schools start in that last week in August. So we're actually not that far away. So what I'd like to do is sort of help us inch towards some type of a transition plan, because a transition is not like a all or nothing. It's a let's move in a direction. And we know that by their nature, teens tend to be resistant to any of that. So it's as adults, we have to kind of set the stage and provide some of that structure and that momentum.
But maybe expecting them to use Google Calendar and write everything down on a whiteboard, that might be too much. You said you suggest we create a schedule and share it, because for most teenagers, organization isn't a strong suit, and it's not their fault. Their brains are still developing.
Right. It is not their strong suit. And it helps us as adults too, right? So if I'm creating a schedule, I'm looking towards, I'm someone that uses an Outlook calendar, right? I'm looking towards a schedule or a calendar. It's getting some input. It's not dictating to them what's going to happen. It's engaging their cooperation, what's going to be motivating for them. They're very motivated to start football practice or start field hockey or, whatever it is that they want to do. They're excited to get back with friends again. So using that motivation, but having some type of a schedule. And, part of that, and we're going to talk about this several different times, is not being overscheduled. So not filling up that schedule so that, they've got their entire school day. Then from 3 to 4, they're doing something. 4 to 5, they're doing, right. That is just overwhelming for anyone. And it's really just not healthy for our young people.
Right. We definitely have gotten into that overscheduling. I'm hoping that we can get out of it a little bit. But, I have a rising senior. So in addition to school, there's all the college apps and just like the extra stuff. So you want us to help schedule not just the morning schedule and the school schedule, but their after school schedule. But what does that really look like? Like, should I be using Google Calendar and structuring it out and inviting them, or what should we do as parents to kind of ease this or even set some good examples?
Well, it really kind of depends on your family situation, your family dynamic. Some families do well with like a big kind of whiteboard and, and they write things out for the week. My sister is one of those people, right? She has a whiteboard and she might write out the schedule for the weekend because, her kids are more very young adolescent age. So whatever works for your family, but it is helpful to have multiple ways to access it. So it might be on a phone calendar, it might be on a whiteboard in your house, it might be on a large piece of paper, whatever you need to do. But sometimes having multiple inputs is a way that helps it stick a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure. And probably helps with the parents too, when you're sitting there going, how come you didn't know that Johnny had a dentist appointment and you were taking him today? So yeah, okay. Right. So, and we're all overscheduled, but let's just talk about that for a moment. this idea, I mean, there was just something on Instagram by the Holderness family, which they're hysterical, but they're talking about applying to college in the 90s versus today. And, you know, oh, my after school activities, my grandmother had a pool and there was a diving board. I think I'll write that down versus I have solved world hunger with the nonprofit I created when I was 15, you know, and I'm already applying to 2 schools. I'm applying to 25. So, I mean, we have gotten really a little bit nutty, probably, but yet this is how the world is working, is what teens will say, is I have to do this, or, you know, they don't know how to slow down. How do we, from your side of the couch, what do you say to that?
So I think you're bringing up a really good point, which is I do worry about the amount of pressure that we put on our young people, right? I mean, it's like you haven't solved world hunger, you haven't started your own nonprofit, you know, you haven't put in 10,000 volunteer hours, whatever it is. You know, I'm a believer in doing something well, not doing many things. You know, you don't have to play 10 sports. If you just did one sport and you did that for several years, that's what's important. So it's not necessarily about padding the resume or padding the application, you know, college application. It's about doing things that are meaningful and trying to do things that move you in a direction and that you feel motivated and feel fulfilling. So it's dialing back that external pressure. And you know, we say this all the time, Kara, a lot of that pressure comes from social media. You know, I know this child, they applied for 25 schools and they had 30 extracurricular activities and 1,000 volunteer hours. Well, first of all, I don't ever believe any of those things, but it's not comparing ourselves to them. And it's just trying to do what's best for my child, what's going to work well for my child, what seems to motivate them, and what am I capable of as a parent, because I need to be able to function at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, parental happiness matters. I have a friend who's a physician, and she made a rule in her house with her 3 kids and said, you know what, you can only do the sports that are at school. Like, she just decided, I'm done driving or figuring out who's going to drive you every day with all these, and you know, none of her kids were going to be these amazing Olympians. So she was like, there's so many sports at your schools, pick those. And she said our house got happier. So I guess we should start relooking at, like, how do we want to feel? And what was a problem? What were the pain points last year? I mean, this is sort of an opportunity to say, let's not just do it again because we think we have to.
Right. I mean, the reality is, with a lot of these, you know, high level, very expensive travel teams and whatnot, you know, the percentage of these children that go on to really either pursue these sports in college or certainly beyond professionally is like less than 1%. I mean, I don't even know the exact percentage, but it's got to be less than 1%. The goal in those situations is not to develop a professional athlete in your home. It's to learn the skills to be a better person, a good citizen, and to manage, you know, what's going on. So the more that we can do that, and we can really take the time to realize, you know, are we learning things about ourselves? Is this really fulfilling for my child, or does it in fact make them more miserable? That's so important to recognize as well, because they're not going to go on to be professional soccer players or volleyball players or football players or basketball players. However, are they learning the things that are going to make them a better person? That's really what's most important.
Yeah. Now, something basic, your second tip, which really applies to all ages. We're talking about teens first, and then we're going to get to the little ones. But the wake up and go and bedtimes, okay? So wake up and go to bedtimes are something that we really have to work on. And you might be thinking, okay, I have a young child, they need tons of sleep. But in fact, teenagers need 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. And I know many of them would roll their eyes and say, like, no way, I can't get that.
Right. Well, but in the summer they do get it because they go to bed later, they sleep later, they get a nap in it during the day. I mean, they're actually getting in some of that sleep. It doesn't really work like I had a sleep deficit all year. Now I'm making up for it all summer. It's just about making some small changes to your sleep habits. And, you know, again, you're not going to go from going to bed at midnight to going to bed at 9 o'clock, but inching yourself back in a direction. We just feel better. Our brains function better. We learn better. everything's better when we get a little bit more sleep.
Yeah.
And sleep really is about habits.
You know, this summer I was really proud of my daughter. She's been getting up early and going to the gym, which is something I have not been able to master. She has a friend going with her, so that probably helps. But I noticed she's so much better now that she actually goes to bed earlier and gets up and exercises in the morning. Now, she's saying like she's sad because she doesn't think she can do that when school starts. You know, we all have a little bit more time in the summer. But I guess if we can get our teens to maybe just see, like, and recognize, how'd you feel that you stayed up till midnight and had to get up at 6:30? And then how'd you feel that you went to bed at 10? Don't you feel so much better? Then it's not just mom, you know, at you.
Right. Right. And that kind of learning that you're talking about, right? When A happens, B follows. When you go to bed at a decent time, you wake up feeling more rested. That kind of learning is a little bit spottier in teenagers, just to be realistic here.
Okay.
And you know, that they don't necessarily recognize that, or certainly may not want to admit it to their parent.
Yeah.
But the more we can do things to set them up for success, and sleep and nutrition are the low-hanging fruit to set us up for success. You know, to do things that will just make us feel better, make us feel less irritable. And again, I'm not talking drastic changes. I mean, sometimes 15 minutes or half hour can make a big difference in how you feel the next day. And we do have a couple weeks left. So trying to move them a little bit more towards something that's a healthier bedtime and a healthier wake up time is really going to be helpful.
Even just 15 minutes a night, and by the time school starts, you're like kind of where you need to be. Screen time, boy, that is something that teens and parents tend to argue about. It could be interfering with their sleep, but talk a little bit about what we need to know when it comes to screen time and how we can really make a difference for our kids.
I worry most about screen time in the evenings, and you know, that when kids have their phones in their rooms, that beep, buzz, bing, bang, you know, it sends messages to your brainstem, and it prevents you from really getting into some of the deep stages of sleep, or even some of the, you know, the REM sleep, the dream sleep that we need.
Yeah.
So, you know, getting phones out of the room for certainly for overnights, having them be absolutely off so they don't beep and bing, and you know, doing some of the things, having some breaks. I'm realistic. I know that we're not going to give them up, although more and more schools are talking about locking them up, and I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah.
But you know, finding ways to, you know, from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, it's a screen-free time. You put your phone away and you just do something else. You go for a walk, you read a book, you play with the dog, you do, you know, play with the cat, you do something. So taking some breaks is much more realistic than an all or nothing approach.
Yeah, and just if you're wondering, as parents, you know, the kids start to realize that they feel better. I mean, we just had this pilot program that Governor Lamont wanted in Connecticut. I think it was in Manchester, and they squawked, the kids were mad, and after about a week or so, they said they ended up liking it more. There was less drama at school. They could focus more. We don't realize, and adults, you know, we do it too, but if these little constantly feeling like, what did I miss something, is taking away, it's draining us. So I'm all for it. I know the private schools take them away anyway. I don't know why we allow them so much in high schools, that kids could be like, I have this phone here, but I could not be reading this, doing this while I'm talking to you, which is often what kids are doing in high school. So I'm with you.
Right, and you're right, they're going to be resistant to that because it's like an addiction, right? It's like an extension of them. Okay. So, you know, you take away that extension of them, it causes heightened anxiety and arousal, and that's what makes them a little bit more anxious and panicky. But when you get through that, you know, that kind of peak of anxiety and arousal, and you realize, wow, I'm not worried about, you know, who's texting who or who's snapping who, or, you know, that kind of stuff during the day. It's less of a distraction. I just think it's going to improve learning. And I think we've only realized in the past few years how out of control the whole thing has gotten.
Absolutely. We also want to schedule, this may seem like an oxymoron, but you should schedule downtime into the routine, especially in this culture that prizes just being busy all the time.
Right. So that downtime can be, you know, no screens. That downtime can be, You don't have to be doing homework or other activities. That downtime is just really important to have your own thoughts, or to go for a walk, or to do something that's solely going to kind of refresh you emotionally. And that's really something that I want adults and parents to do as well. I think sometimes parents of younger kids, their downtime is once their kids go to bed at night, which, that's just the reality of life with younger children. You can't have downtime, right before dinner when things need to be done and the kids are running around the house. That's just not realistic. But finding ways to build in some downtime, some me time, whatever you need to do to refresh yourself is so important.
Yeah, very healthy form of stress relief. I know that you're big into mindfulness and meditation, but as a middle of the road psychologist, you're also realistic. This is something that I really want to teach my teens. If I had had those resources, I think high school, college would have been much easier, and even our young ones. How do we get our teens to embrace any kind of mindfulness practice?
So mindfulness doesn't have to be sitting in a dark room, holding your hands out with a chant. That's not necessarily what it has to be. Mindfulness really is about non-judgmentally being in the moment. You can do a mindfulness walk where you walk and you focus on your five senses. What do I see? What do I hear? What do I feel? What do I taste? What do I smell? There's ways to be in the moment non-judgmentally. That's what the critical skill is. It doesn't have to be true meditation, although that's a beautiful thing to teach children. I think more and more schools are doing that. But remember, mindfulness is about being in the moment non-judgmentally. And so the more we can not be distracted by all these other things, but realize, wow, the air is really, warm but cool today. The leaves are really green, or there's a few clouds in the sky, but it's very blue, right? All that's very mindfulness. And those are the kind of things that we want to focus on.
What do you do for the kid who just, obviously they have to go, and I think most parents put their foot down and say they have to go, but they just say every day, I hate school. I hate school. I don't like it.
There's a bigger issue there. And I'm not sure what the bigger issue is. I mean, it's fairly common that kids occasionally say, I have a stomach ache, or my arm hurts, or I have a headache, right? And I like to remind parents that those we call them somatic complaints, right? Physical complaints are real. Like their stomach might really hurt. They might really have a headache. Their arm might really hurt. However, it's not a reason not to go to school. So it's about validating. I understand that your stomach hurts, but this is not part of a flu or virus. You're able to go to school. Like there's a bigger thing. And when you see this as a pattern where it's happening every single day, and it looks like they're avoiding things, or their anxiety is so high they're not managing it, there's bigger issues. And that's where I really want parents to start with your school support professionals, your school support personnel. What are you seeing from my child in school? Or do they seem like once they get over that hump, they're in school, then they're fine? Or are they going to the nurse several times a day with a lot of physical ailments? So I want to look for patterns in those behaviors. But it is fairly common in young children that physical complaints equals some type of anxiety or something they're not able to express.
Also, I've been reading, great resource if you have neurodivergent kids, ADHD, the Attitude magazine, ADD. But one of the suggestions was that even when the kids are older, sending a letter to all the teachers, but almost in the first person. And I guess you got to get your kid to write this if they're willing, or my question is, do we do it as parents, about the child's learning style? Often when they're little, we get that. Like, how does your child learn? What do they like? As they get into high school, where it actually gets harder and you have less connection with the teachers, it's actually, this was advocating that parents do it or get their kids to do it, but really reach out in the beginning of the year of like, these are all the things that, how I really learn best, or if you notice I'm not turning in an assignment, I suggest this, or, that kind of stuff. Please let me or my child know sooner rather than later if you're noticing something.
That's a great idea. My only caveat with that is, so especially with experienced teachers really learn fairly quickly what tends to make different students tick, right? And when you're a high school teacher, you have multiple classes of English or multiple classes of science or biology, whatever it is. That's why those school conferences are often within the first couple of weeks of school. I do like teachers to sort of get a sense of the students in the class and the grade as a whole. But to give it a week or two and then reach out to, again, your school support personnel, your administration, your individual teachers to say, in my experience, this is what's worked best for my child, but I'm open to your feedback as well. But I do like, teachers to get a sense of the child first, before we kind of color their perspective in any way.
Okay. I want to talk about some of the younger kids as well, but we're going to take a quick break to talk about an important mental health issue, and we'll be right back to talk about kids who are a little younger and going back to school.
Struggling with gambling? Wheeler Health's Better Choice program offers personalized support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit wheelerhealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
And welcome back to CURES, where we are here with child psychologist Dr. Laura Saunders from the Institute of Living with Hartford Healthcare, talking about really a well-being checklist for getting back to school. We've talked about a lot of things with teens, and I know there's some crossover with younger kids. In some ways, I think it's almost a little bit easier because we have more control over the devices, or they listen to us a little bit more when they're younger, but there's still the physical labor with the little ones.
Right. There is still the pushback. So yes, I mean, and parents of younger kids, now's the time to start with better habits and more open communication and knowing kind of what works and doesn't work for your young ones. It is harder as a parent of younger kids because it's a more labor intensive. You have to put a lot more effort in. As they get older, you lose a little bit of control, but then there's a little bit more independence. So there's kind of an offset there. But the more effort and energy you can put in when they're younger, the better it is, so that you can create better habits and a little bit more structure and routine as they get older.
Yeah, and we're talking about some easy mental health tips for especially the younger kids, but I think this applies often to families. So take where you are in your stage of life. But number one, you said it's really important to spend quality time together, and that's really important to start even at a younger age. I know it gets harder. Teens may not want to spend as much of it, but why is that so protective, and how do we institute that in our busy lives?
Right. And quality time can be driving in the car together, right? And it's not necessarily the time to be drilling your young person for all the different things. It's about sort of leaving space open so that if a thought or an idea or an experience during the day, comes to mind, that someone shares it, right? So it's kind of leaving that open space, and it's the connection that's really important. And the more you can just allow time for that connection, and again, it doesn't have to be hours and hours and hours a day. It can just be, it's the quality of the time together, not necessarily the quantity.
Okay. And also with younger kids, it's a good time to really start talking about bullying, according to the CDC. And how do we do that?
Right. What I love to do when I work with young people and when I work with families is really help them build on their kind of emotional intuition. If something feels uncomfortable to you, if something doesn't feel right, if something makes you upset, then it's something to recognize and talk about. And instead of just stuffing down those feelings and just being like, oh, well, what he did to me, that was okay. That was okay. It's like, no, it's something that made you upset, right? It's really building on that emotional intelligence, helping our young people realize this is what makes me feel safe. This is what makes me feel unsafe. This is comfortable. This is uncomfortable. And really talking about some of those things. Because it could be like, for one child, going swimming is very comfortable, but going swimming in the water around them is uncomfortable, right? So there's so many ways that we can start to talk about that sense of self and what feels right and what feels not right. And then it branches into bigger things like being uncomfortable around other kids, or if you're being bullied, or if you're having experiences in school where other people are not treating you well. How do you manage that? How do you recognize that? So it's really starting to open up some of those lines of communication.
And I love, the statistic is troubling that 1 in 5 high school students report being bullied. 1 in 6 say they've been bullied electronically. But you said it's also important to talk about being a helpful bystander. Sometimes I get so frustrated when I see something going on and I'm thinking, why are all the kids allowing this? Why are they not saying something or standing up to the mean girl?
Right. sometimes the greatest and most significant protective factor is having just one friend, right? You don't need a ton of friends. You don't need a large group. You don't need, 5 best friends. Sometimes just having one friend can be a real protective factor. So encouraging your child to build and establish a friendship, and having that one friend be someone that you trust and know will have your back. And empowering our young people to speak up when something uncomfortable or upsetting or mean is happening that you see happening to someone else. Empowering them to say something and speaking up is a very, very powerful tool to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even that skill of self-advocacy as a young person, you want to help back your kids up, but as they get older in high school and then off to college, when you really have no connection to the teachers or what's happening, I mean, we sort of have to teach that skill of self-advocacy, how you can stand up for yourself in an empowered way and not sound like you're whining or snitching.
Right. I mean, that's a really good point, because it's the only person that knows how I feel is me. And so if I don't speak up about it, then no one else will know what I need or what I want or what's important to me. So learning to stand up for oneself and to be open about what's important to you, to be clear on what your values are, and then to sort of take steps towards living those values. It takes years to really learn a lot of that.
You know, let me also just take a moment here on the pressure, because that's, I think, why some kids might be really excited to go back to school, or they're at least excited to see their friends. And then they start worrying about all the pressure and that they're not going to get into college, or they're not going to get into the gifted and talented program. And I know a lot of that must be coming from us as parents, but as a psychologist, what can you say that can help us as parents not get too worked up about all the marks, the Power School dings going off every day about, oh, this assignment was late or that one wasn't turned in? We didn't really deal with that. Our parents didn't know anything.
Right. Right. I don't often say that ignorance is bliss, but in some of those situations, having less information really was more helpful. Because what happens in these situations is that we then, as parents, become the lawnmower, where we're kind of mowing things down for our child to fall in behind us. Really trying to empower your young person. And again, parents know their kids. You know which of your children need more support and which of them are going to be a little bit more self-starters, to really focus on what's important to them in terms of their goals, to be a very good student. Okay, well, what are the classes that you really want to focus on? You don't have to take an AP class in every subject. You can take a couple, but this is not about changing the world. This is about challenging yourself. And I'm a huge proponent of having some negative or failure experiences as a way to learn, but not overwhelming yourself so that you feel like you're kind of emotionally drowning all the time. So doing things in a way that's meaningful, but a step forward, not just doing a half dozen or a dozen things just to mark it up on your resume.
Absolutely. Well, we're out of time for this, but I hope that you'll listen to this again, maybe share it with your partner, share it with your kids, so we can all go back and feel a little more ease as we enter the school year. Thank you so much, Dr. Laura Saunders.
Thank you, Kara.
Have a great day, everyone, and be well.